Hey everybody, this is Jason Youngblood, the author of The Gospel of Napoleon Hill, Scholar or Scammer. And this is the YouTube channel Napoleon Hill, Scholar or Scammer. And I just post videos as a visual commentary on the actual book, The Gospel of Napoleon Hill, Scholar or Scammer. So I wrote the book in 2024 just as a recap after the Principles of Think and Grow Rich actually produced a lot of positive results in my life, not just income wise from increasing my income over 8 times, but also just being able to achieve other things that I wanted to manifest spiritually, but also just achieve naturally and accomplish naturally as well. So as I began to research the life of Napoleon Hill, a lot of smear campaigns and online just criticism of his life, calling him a fraud, a scammer, talking about his arrests, his lawsuits, and fraudulent business dealings. And then also his marriages as well too, calling him a bad husband and a bad father. There's a particular article that we've been going through called The Untold Story of Napoleon Hill, the greatest self-help scammer of all time, where just point by point, I will address these claims because it's a very comprehensive article, very thorough research, but just not going to the finish line. So that's my only critique of this because I think he did a great job as far as providing biographical details of Napoleon Hill and finding resources that are not public domain or not easy to find. That's not my only criticism. My other criticism is that I think he went into it biased. I don't think he went into it completely neutral, saying, let me just find the information. It seems as if, just based off of the tone of his interviews about this article and the tone of the actual article, that he went into it already believing that Napoleon Hill was a scammer and then finding evidence to back that claim up instead of going into it neutral. So I can honestly tell you that although after I read Think and Grow Rich, I began to see the results in my own life positively. When I went into this, I actually, just scaled back a little bit, put the car in neutral, and then just researched it with the possibility that I might find out that he was a scammer or a fraud. So I went into all of my research as thoroughly as I could with the thought that, hey, he might be vindicated, he might be validated, his story may check out, that he knew Andrew Carnegie, and that the result of these business dealings was actually ethical. And there was a good reason of why he was sued and arrested several times, or the other side of the story to his marriages, his tumultuous marriages, or he actually may turn out to be a horrible person who defrauded people out of millions of dollars, and that was his intention from the jump, and all he wanted to do was sell books. So that was a possibility as well too, which is what true journalism is. And so I just present to you, these are just content creators. So Melissa Daughtery or CoffeeZilla or Matt Novak or any of these guys that I mentioned, as far as the popularity of their YouTube content or the articles online, they did not practice the laws of the different tactics and skills of journalism. What they did was, purely for viral content, to be able to have that be popularized by taking a book like Think and Grow Rich and piggybacking off of the popularity of that by discrediting the author. And so what I wanted to do was a different take. Now, I'm not a journalist. I didn't study journalism or have any journalism credentials, but I did want to practice some of those principles, in the sense that I want to go into it unbiased, do the research, and then present it to you. So I can honestly just say that I actually went into this research with the possibility that he may be a fraud and he may be a scammer, and was just bracing myself to find that out. So just going back into the article from Matt Novak, Napoleon Hill, the greatest self-help scammer of all time. The next claim that he makes, and this is episode 8 of Napoleon Hill, Scholar or Scammer. The next claim that he makes is just going into the actual biography of Napoleon Hill. So some of these are just really like softball claims. They're not really, heavy hitting claims as far as his character are concerned, but just a couple of corrections here. So he writes here, Oliver Napoleon Hill was born in 1883, the son of James Hill, an unlicensed dentist and occasional moonshiner, and his mother, Sarah, Napoleon wouldn't stop using his first name until around 1908, though as a child, his family would affectionately call him Nat. So there was a couple of things here that I just wanted to correct is that his father was an unlicensed dentist. So if I show you within the book, The Gospel of Napoleon Hill, Scholar or Scammer, I'll show you the article where he actually got his license because he was licensed. So it's actually on page 22. You'll see here, this is and I'll minimize my screen again. Sorry about that. So you can see it here, but it's on page 22 of the book, and I'll send this article to you if you like. Diplomas presented to large class of graduates. This is the Louisville College of Dentistry in Louisville, Kentucky. So you can see this is the graduation here. And this is from May 5th, 1904. And it just says the commencement exercises of the Louisville College of Dentistry were held last night in Macaulay's Theater in the presence of a large audience of friends and graduates. After the opening prayer, the announcements of the next session of the college were made. The candidates for the degrees were then presented, and the diplomas were awarded by Dr. W.E. Grant, the dean of the faculty. The following were graduated, and it goes through a long list of graduates, including J.M. Hill or James Monroe Hill from Virginia, which you can see highlighted right there. So he actually did get his license. And so um, this is one of the other newspaper articles I found of him practicing dentistry while he was unlicensed. So he was unlicensed here in January of 1900. And so, in the late 1890s, he practiced dentistry and had an office and promoted himself as Dr. J.M. Hill, dentist, Wise, Virginia. All right, in this building here. And he had not been licensed yet. So in early 1900, he leaves Wise, Virginia for Louisville, Kentucky, and attends the Louisville College of Dentistry and obtains his license 4 years later in 1904. So just wanted to debunk that real quick that he was unlicensed. Also, I don't know if it's just a typo or if he just didn't thoroughly research how to spell Sarah's name here. So you'll see that he calls his mother Sarah, Sara. And then the other thing that he actually says about Sarah is that Hill's early life is described as one of solitude and frustration after his mother died of an illness when he was just 9 years old. And so if you'll look at the actual headstone for Sarah's gravesite, you'll see how her name is actually spelled. And then you'll also see, where did here we go. So it's actually spelled with an H, and you'll see that she passed away on May 28th, 1890. Now, Napoleon Hill was born on October 26th, 1883, so it would have made him turning 7 on October 26th, 1890. He wouldn't turn 8 until October 26th, 1891. So he was actually about, 5 months removed away from turning 8 years old. So he was 7.5 years old, or 7 and 7 months, years old here. So he was not 9 years old. And so I'm not sure if he just didn't do a thorough enough research on when she passed away or the actual spelling of her name with an H. But that's, like I said, that's a softball. That's very minor detail. That was a discrepancy there. And just going on here in the article, he goes on to mention here that Napoleon Hill actually started writing. So a year after Napoleon Hill's mother died, James would remarry a woman named Martha, who by Hill's account was the one person who kept the mischievous Nap on the straight and narrow. The young Napoleon would regularly get into trouble with a pistol that he carried around the backwoods of Virginia at the tender age of 12. This is a true statement, according to Napoleon Hill's own memoirs, in addition to his life story, Lifetime of Riches, that was released in 1995. Martha Ramey was her name, or Martha Hill after she married James Hill. But Martha encouraged Napoleon's education and especially his writing. She even bought him a typewriter in 1895. So she exchanged the typewriter for the pistol and told him, if you become as good with a typewriter as you are with that gun, you may become rich and famous and known throughout the world. So this had a very big impact on him, somebody just encouraging him to stop being so mischievous and to actually have constructive habits. And fuel that energy in a positive way. And this had an impact on him because he became a famous writer. So those words actually resounded to be true in his life. So Napoleon started writing for a small weekly newsletter whose stories were sometimes picked up by small newspapers in Virginia. So this statement is a little untrue because it was actually several newspapers, local newspapers throughout rural Southwest Virginia, where he began to write different stories. And at this time, he is only 13 years old. So he's still a teenager at this time. And so you'll see here, this is in 1895. So in 1896, he's only 13 years old. And so he just quotes here from the biography. Napoleon soon became a prolific source of stories. His writing was unpolished, if not crude, but he compensated with unbound verve and a vivid imagination. I think that's supposed to be nerve. Indeed, he later recalled that when news was scarce and there weren't any stories to tell, he simply made them up. And so, for some reason, Novak connects him making up stories at 13 years old and being a prodigy for his time and being a young reporter. He goes on to connect that to him being a fraudulent author and making stuff up and not being an honest or person or having integrity. So he goes on to say this knack for storytelling and outright deceit, 13-year-old making up stories, would come to define the life of Napoleon Hill, a young man who would embrace fakery as he strived to make his way in life through the cell of dreams. It's perhaps fitting that much later he would be charged under something called the blue sky laws in Chicago. Throughout his life, Hill was selling the promise of blue skies for everybody if only they follow his proven model of success. Proven, that is, by anyone but Napoleon Hill. So I just thought that this was a low blow for him to try to make this connection. There's no connection to him actually being a 13-year-old teenager with acne and a high-pitched voice making up stories when we don't know the standards of these newsletters or newspapers. He wasn't an actual reporter as far as being 13 years old to actually practice journalism or report true stories. And so sometimes they would be true, but sometimes they would be untrue. It sounds like the role that he had on these newspapers was just to present the stories. And so he'd make some up and he'd have some true, but there was no standard of, hey, only report true stories as if he's Walter Cronkite or something. So there was no indication that he was supposed to be only, reporting on true stories. And then also just to make that connection to something that happened in 1918 and 1917, over 25 years later, when he's a fully grown adult from 13 years old, saying that he was full of fakery and deceit that whole time, just completely destroying his character, even as a teenager, all the way up until he's in his 30s, I thought was a low blow. So let's talk about the blue sky laws in Chicago. Um, Now I'll just take you to page 250 on in the Gospel of Napoleon Hill, Scholar or Scammer, and just read a sort section from there. So I'll share my screen with you here, and then I'll go to page 250 here. So, and this just addresses the blue sky laws and what the actual accusation was and what actually happened. So after his candy business, Betsy Ross Candy Company, failed, Hill wanted his next business venture to be a school of advertising and salesmanship. He had already prepared a course to teach, but needed $25,000 to open his school. $25,000 is $720,000, a little bit more than that in 2024. This is now 2026, but it's a little over $700,000. Therefore, he planned to partner with an existing college where he could teach his course. His idea was to boost their enrollment in exchange for money. Hill then searched for such a school and settled upon the Bryant and Stratton Business College. Bryant and Stratton had several locations across the country, most of which no longer existed. And by 1916, the Chicago location was also in danger of closing their doors. This is just a little background story. We're going to get to the Chicago Blue Sky laws and what they entail. This background story is going to be key in revealing of why Napoleon Hill sold speculative stocks, and that was the Blue Sky Law. It actually passed January 1st, 1918. And when Hill sold the stock, it was 1917. So it was before the law got passed. And it was also in another state where it was legal. He did not organize his business in the state of Illinois, even though he resided there. He organized his business in the state where selling speculative stocks were legal. And all the blue sky laws mean is that you're not allowed to sell stocks that have not been verified. And so, through the Secretary of State, you have to present your assets, your liabilities, you have to present your expenses, and then you have to get an actual license from the Secretary of State to be able to sell stocks. He did not go through that process for Illinois. And so, when you sell a stock, without that process, it's illegal and you actually get charged and can face fines and prison time. So we'll read on here. When Hill met the school's owners of the Bryan and Stratton Business College about his course, he presented a plan that would help them increase enrollment. To execute his plan, he would teach the course for $150. $150 is a little over $4,300 in 2024. So he would teach his course for $150 per student and allow them to collect all of the tuition. So he's not taking a dime. He's just letting them take all the tuition in exchange for them giving him a chance to teach in their school. The profits from tuition would be compensation for the school's advertising his course as a Bryan and Stratton class. Therefore, the marketing of his course at their school would also attract more students to their regular classes. Once the advertising was paid for from the increase in tuition, the school would equally divide the profits with Hill. So this was his plan, is to go to a school that was faltering, say, hey, I am going to teach a class that's going to boost your enrollment. Only thing I ask is that you advertise the class. And any advertising dollars that you spend on advertising my class as a Bryan and Stratton class, you keep that. You don't need to actually pay me any of that. The profits from advertising the class, just take all the tuition, take all the increased enrollment as well too. The only thing I want is that after 1 year of teaching, and we continue to read on here, of teaching my course at your school, he would run the advertising department under his own school name. So that was the deal, is that after a year, if indeed it boosted their enrollment, is that he would run his own advertising department under his own school name. He would no longer just be an instructor for Bryan and Stratton. He would have his own school in their building. In conclusion, Hill explained that they would attract new students since no other business college in Chicago offered a class on advertising and salesmanship. The school's owners accepted Hill's proposal. As a result, his plan to increase enrollment was successful. The first ad for his course was published on July 25th, 1916. By August 13, 1917, a little over a year and a few weeks, he had incorporated his own school called the George Washington Institute. While retelling this experience, Hill states that he got the idea for this plan from when Andrew Carnegie consolidated smaller steel companies into U.S. Steel. Andrew Carnegie did this in 1901 when he sold Carnegie Steel to J.P. Morgan Chase. And not only did he sell Carnegie Steel, there were other steel companies that he had, in addition to other owners of steel companies that sold it to J.P. Morgan Chase, and they consolidated all these, steel companies into the U.S. Steel Company. And so that was his idea for consolidating his business, or his class, in with the business of Bryan and Stratton Business College. He also reveals that he adopted Henry Ford's policy of securing financing from other sources that naturally benefit from using their capital. So he's name dropping Andrew Carnegie and Henry Ford in this process that he did here in 1916. As an instructor at Bryan and Stratton, Hill wrote his second booklet entitled From Poverty to $10,000 a Year. When interested students requested a free personal analysis chart, they would receive information on the home study course and a copy of the booklet. In the book, Hill detailed his professional journey from working in a coal mine for $1 a day. All right, $1 a day is $37 per day today, or it's about $13,500 a year today, to earning over $10,000 a year, which is a little over $288,000 a year today. And then he wrote his third booklet entitled How to Sell Your Services. So we talked about that when we were talking about his association with Woodrow Wilson. And so there were some key figures who were a part of that book, as well as Andrew Carnegie contributing to that book as well, too. All right, so he did this while he was president of the George Washington Institute. To market the book, he wrote to some of the successful men he knew, requesting letters of endorsement from them. And then I go through the list of men that we already went over when we talked about Woodrow Wilson. And so if we go down to page 263, And we'll skip over that section because that more had to do with his association with Woodrow Wilson. We'll see his first ad here. Now I'll minimize my screen. So this first ad for the George Washington Institute is on August 18th, 1917. This is the first ad for George Washington Institute. And it was a year after he started teaching at Bryan and Stratton. And so you can see that up here. His class was going to start in September of 1916. So he'd actually started teaching there in July, but his class started in September. And 11 months later, he had already had his own school called George Washington Institute. All right. And then if we continue to read here, just blow my screen back up. Just wanted to show you that article very quickly. As president of George Washington Institute, Hill duplicated what he did at LaSalle and began sharing sales of his school. So at LaSalle University, one of the things that he would do, because they had a tuition problem, he was also a professor. So before he was a professor and instructor at Bryan and Stratton, he was an advertising manager for LaSalle. And what he would do at that school is he realized that they were having trouble with tuition because they were late with several of his payments. They struggled to pay him his stated salary and his pay plan. And so what he realized is that they were struggling with tuition. So to help them boost tuition, he had the idea to actually allow the students to buy into the shares of the school so they could be co-owners of the school. That way, as the school grew and their enrollment grew and their tuition grew, they would get returns on that as well, and it would help them pay their tuition. So he was going to do the same thing here for George Washington Institute. So he wanted to duplicate what he did at LaSalle. So he began selling shares of his school. Doing so guaranteed that tuition would be paid by the dividends his students received. He then advertised enrollment in the school by mailing marketing letters to high school students across the country. He would recruit seniors and juniors in high school to come to his school as a vocation instead of going to traditional college. The letters advertised the potential growth of the stock and promoted being able to pay for tuition by investing in the school. At this time, blue sky laws were increasing nationwide. The law prevented anyone from selling purely speculative stocks without a license. It also required that a sworn statement of assets, liabilities, and earnings be reported in order to sell any promotional stocks. Therefore, investors could obtain authentic information about the promotional stocks they were solicited to buy. By the summer of 1917, blue sky laws have been passed in 26 states. The Illinois legislature passed their own bill in July of that year. All right. Every other state besides Nevada and Delaware also proposed passing blue sky laws as well. Therefore, Hill incorporated his school in the state of Delaware, then proceeded to legally sell shares to his students. So he incorporated his schools in Delaware, not in Illinois, so that he could legally share Ostera. So he sold or sold shares in his school legally because it was not incorporated in Illinois. So he just bypassed that as a loophole. After Hill accumulated $100,000 from the tuition of his advertising course, he listed the value of his new school. All right. He listed that $100,000 as the value of his new school because that's what he had earned. He then sold 10,000 shares to his students for $10 apiece. As a result, the students paid their tuition faithfully with the dividend they received, allowing their school to pay Hill an income of $2,500 a month. This was about $61,000 a month in 2024. So that's quite a large salary there. In the midst of this success, Hill students suddenly began dissenting against him. So this is the accusation of the blue sky laws and who actually accuses him of violating that. And then the details actually come out in the newspapers, which the critics, that say that he did this crime didn't actually thoroughly research to the end to find out what the end result was. Yes, he was accused, but the end result is that he was exonerated. So as the morale of his students waned, Hill became more confused about the source of their mutiny. He then decided to meet with them one-on-one to discover who was behind their loss of enthusiasm. Two of the students he sold stocks to were James V. McCullough and a foreign student from Germany named H.E. Gorbolke. He soon learned that McCullough and Gorbolke had been spreading negative rumors about him. The rumors also caught the attention of Bryan and Stratton, which caused them great concern. Therefore, they wanted Hill to completely separate his school from Bryan and Stratton. They wanted George Washington Institute to be in a separate building. However, he still owed them some of the $25,000 they had spent on advertising his course, so they allowed him to make monthly payments until the balance was paid in full. Within 1 year, he completely paid for the title to his school and was no longer affiliated with the Bryan and Stratton Business College. He then changed the name of his college to Napoleon Hill Institute on June 27th, 1918. So he changed the name of his school, just because the George Washington Institute was more so affiliated with Bryan and Stratton. Now that he's separating himself from Bryan and Stratton Business College, he's going to change the name of his school to just Napoleon Hill Institute. After he learned of Gorbalki's actions, he made it his mission to discover the true nature of his slander. He suspected Gorbalki of being a German spy. So he went to the FBI and had him placed under investigation. He also asked the chief post office inspector to examine Gorbalki's mail before it was delivered. The investigation revealed that Gorbalki was indeed an undercover agent who was ordered to use a Chicago business as a front. His assignment had been to provide Germany with information on plants where war materials were being made while blending in with American society. Therefore, the Department of Justice brought Gorbalki in for questioning and ordered him to report to them daily. This is actually on record in newspaper articles as well, too. So this information on H.E. Gorbalki actually being investigated by the Department of Justice and being a German spy actually turned out to be true. He was only there in Hill's posing as a student in Hill's class to be able to spread dissension and to be able to take information back to Germany at the time, because this is right at the height of World War One, where everybody was, was being accused of being a German spy. So there was a lot of suspicion at this time. When Gorbalki discovered who had him investigated, he and McCullough went to the Attorney General's office to report that Hill had violated the Blue Sky Law when he sold them stocks. That's what prompted the investigation. It wasn't that, hey, something illegal happened and Gorbalki and McCullough just said, hey, he violated the stocks. These were students of his in his course at the George Washington Institute before he actually formed Napoleon Hill Institute in 1918. He sold them stocks in 1917. The law didn't go into effect until January 1st, 1918. So he sold them stocks before the law became in effect. And then he also did that under a business that was incorporated under Delaware and not Illinois. And so I just finished this section saying they claim that he persuaded them to invest in shares of George Washington Institute without a license. The shares of the stock had actually been sold in 1917. Prior to the law being in effect on January 1st, 1918, the school had also been incorporated under the laws of the state of Delaware, where there were no blue sky laws in effect. Therefore, the Attorney General dismissed the suit. The Attorney General dismissed the suit and ordered the Department of Justice to take custody of Gorbalki. Then just a few months later, Hill was forced to close his school's doors for good due to another unforeseen challenge. And we'll talk a little bit about that and other claims. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just end the video for in episode 8 for now. And we'll in episode 9 go into Napoleon Hill's marriages. So one of the other claims that he makes is that Napoleon Hill has been married 5 times, and that one of his marriages was so scandalous that he had to include it in his content in this article as well. And some of the other content creators comment on this marriage, where they say that he was abusive and violent towards his daughter and towards his first wife. So we go into the details of that to find out what actually happened. But regarding this, as far as the blue sky laws in Chicago, he did not violate them. Okay, so 2 of his former students from George Washington Institute, one of them being a German spy who was ordered by the German government, and this is all historical record. You can find newspaper articles on H.E. Gorbalki, is saying that, hey, you had me investigated because I began to spread dissension amongst the students. So when you find out that it was me that was actually spreading those rumors about you and your class beginning to falter a little bit as far as attendance, you had me investigated by the FBI, And then once I find out that I'm being investigated, I'm going to come after you with something that was not founded. I came after you saying that you sold me stocks illegally because now it's 1918 where selling stocks without a license is illegal, but you did it before it became a law, and your business was under a state incorporation that where it was legal in Delaware. So this is episode 8. In episode 9, we'll talk a little bit more about his marriages and the details of his first marriage, which some people say that he was only 15 years old when that happened. Again, you can get a copy of the book in a few different formats. It's on Audible as a audiobook. It's on Kindle as an ebook, and then you can also get it on Amazon in 3 different print versions. There's a full 700-page book. You can get it in 4 different volumes if you don't want to read the whole 700-page book as one big, thick, you know, Bible here. Or you could just get the abridged version, which is only 100 pages long, in the companion guide. The companion guide is still thick, but it is only the newspaper articles that prove my claims, debunking the salacious claims of his critics. All right. Until then, guys, I appreciate it. Take care.